Hey, Durrick, how you doing?
Good, thank you, Mark. How are you?
Great, thanks. I'm stoked to be able to be here again with you. Just to start off, let's give people a little bit of context. So you've now had a total of you've been at the clinic for 5 weeks,
Yeah,
and the last 3 weeks have been more intense.
yeah,
Uh, so, give us sort of a bit of a summary of the last 5 weeks, and then what you're expecting here in the next week.
yeah. Cool. Thanks, Mark. So 5 weeks, yes, I've done, and the last 3 weeks have been intensive. And the intensive, the distinction on that is the R-SOTA treatment, which is the injection of various things into your body to help stimulate the immune system. The first 2 weeks were just really getting into momentum of doing the oxygen therapy, doing the starting the chelation and some of the IV therapy, and the delay is the 2 weeks first off is just standard, because when you arrive at the clinic you do a whole lot of tests, and then the tests come back and they can tailor the treatment specifically to you. But those first 2 weeks, they already had an indication of where my metals and stuff were at, so we could start the treatment. So just started on the IV and chelation, and doing the hyperbaric chambers and the other therapies he's got in the clinic. And that was really cool. I was feeling pretty good and chipper, thinking I've got this thing sorted, no problem. And then the third week that I was here, that's when the soda treatment came back, and so we started that, and that's when the immune system starts to get involved. You, I'm not going to say agitate, that's not the right word, but you stimulate it so that it responds, so your body can activate what it needs in a natural immunitive response to be able to deal with the issues in your body. So one thing that had been indicated, it's a standard treatment for everybody that does the autoimmune treatment that I'm doing. But what was indicated is that my immune system wasn't operating as right as it could be. So it needed a bit of assistance to activate it. So yeah, 3 weeks. The soda treatment's the key one. They increase the doses every time you do that. The first 2 weeks, the first week I had a strong response on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being normal, 10 being a response. I had a 5. And then the following week I had a 7. That was last week. Sorry, 7, and then that was full on intense. That was fevers and aches
Oh,
and
wow.
pains and lightheadedness and that sort of stuff. And then this week, just being, was a 2, which is a bit different, because ideally we want to see another strong response to show that your body's still dealing and processing properly. So we're not quite sure. Yeah, we're not quite sure what the 2 is, why so low, but I can put a layman's perspective on it, and that my body's immune system's just skyrocketed. Who knows? Or I could put a layman's term on it again and say, well, the immune system's down, and therefore it didn't respond to what was what was injected into the body. But my whole immune response, to me, dealt with it very easily. If they're increasing the dosage and I'm dealing with it easily, then to me that's a positive sign. So that's the way I'm going to stick with it, because it feels better than the other way, saying I'm going downhill. I'm interpreting it as a good thing. So next week will be increasing the dosage again and seeing what the response is there. I'm going to just jump into the blood tests. So when I do every week you get blood tests taken, and they assess you compared to base markers or baseline when you first start. And I'm improving in all my blood areas, which is really good. The last set of bloods I did on the week showed that I'm nearly into normal range with everything. The only thing that's really low, not really low, but the only thing that's low at the moment is still my hemoglobin. It's low because of the bleeding that I've been experiencing for the past few years. So, but even that, it showed an improvement. My cholesterol went down, LDL cholesterol went down. My circulation's gone up. My heart rate is really good. Resting heart rate after a walk is about 60. Blood pressure is, I think yesterday afternoon, my last blood pressure was 115 over 65. That's pretty good. So everything's showing really positive. I feel pretty good. I'm still tired. My body's generally showing a decline or an increasing trend of tiredness as I've progressed through this treatment. And I spoke to the people about it, and they said it makes sense. Your body's doing a lot of work. So the tiredness is expected, and now it's just a matter of, well, that final week of treatment, allowing that to unfold how it needs to, but hoping to make some pretty big gains in that week.
Hmm. Do you know what? And we may have chatted about this in an earlier conversation, but that treatment that you're getting, uh, like what is in it? What is it that your body's reacting to?
So yeah, soda is a treatment. I don't know specifically what's in it. I know there are compounds taken from um, your urine samples
Okay.
initially, and yeah, that's about all I know with it. But what I do know is that um, when they injected, there's two injections. One is for so you give a urine sample beforehand, and that goes into your body. And there's no discussing this, and this urine therapy has been around for thousands of years. This is just a clinical way of doing it with science to back it up. It's filtered urine that you give a sample, they then turn around and inject that, and then they put the soda in behind it. We could almost say it's stimulating an immune response, which is ideally what, in some ways, if I want to use this word, which I'm cautious to, it's almost like a little vaccination to stimulate the immune system. But anyway, and that's probably not the right term to use because I'm not a doctor or anything, but anyway, similar sort of thing in my mind. So that just stimulates your body to respond to an invader in your system, I guess, and initiate it. So in the past, once again, I'm speaking from my perspective, not from the clinics or from medical training. My immune system's been good. I can heal a cut and stuff, but my immune system hasn't been able to deal with the tumor or the mass that's in my colon because it hasn't been able to identify things as a threat. So it will look at it as a friendly cell and ignore it, whereas your immune system is meant to identify things that are toxic and are abnormal and remove it from your system. So this stimulation of the immune system allows that body to start to identify things that shouldn't be there and process them out through the natural release processes that the body has. So that's the idea of it. Generally people go through a phase, and it's a very short-term thing. And I know last time we spoke, we talked about it, and I can label a whole lot of symptoms that came from it, and it makes it sound diabolical. But in reality, I was actually excited to see what was going to happen last week because of the responses I'd had in the previous weeks. It became an exciting thing because I'm going, well, my body's working. My body is working to get rid of things that are toxic to the body. So that's about as much as I know on it. I'm still reading through the notes. It's been full on in terms of being here and just having the time and the energy to sit there and ingest all the notes that are there about what other therapies do. But that's my layman's understanding of what's going on with it. So if I've said anything that's not technically correct, that's on me. But that's what I perceive as happening around my body.
What has been your emotional response to um, this situation? And maybe how has it changed over the last 6 weeks?
So my emotional, before I even got to North Carolina, I had already been doing a lot of emotional work because I believe in epigenetics. I believe that our emotional state has a huge influence in our health. So I had to release a lot of beliefs that I had inside of me about deserving a healing, about deserving a recovery, about allowing myself to be healthy, how I perceived other people in this world. So that was quite a big journey. And in the space of a month before I got here, I did a really big step. There's been steps the whole way through about how I perceive the world since I got diagnosed. But the last month before getting here was huge. When I got here, the evokes treatment only started the week that I started getting the sodas as well, if I remember rightly. And what I found was that I over the previous few weeks, I've been picking up these emotions around people in my life, stresses in terms of how they influenced me in my life. So that's my family tree essentially. Working through my grandparents, my parents, and siblings if they're there, no, and then other people that have been in my life, and the emotional recognition that's come from there is I don't know if it's by design or not, but I actually love the way the clinic has set up the practices in terms of the therapies and the days that you do things. Saturday and Sunday, you generally rest, and I try to rest. I don't try to do very much because I'm kind of tired from the week, and I don't really want to go out and be working too hard energetically in terms of spending exercise and sweating, and I just don't want to do much because the body's just saying I need a rest. And so I'm trying to listen to that, and also exercise-wise, I can't go out and do too much sweaty exercises because I got to keep the PIC line clean. You don't want to sweat there because it can get infected. So the weekend you rest. The Monday you come in there, you get into the clinic, you get your IV collation started, or your IV treatment started, and then on the Tuesday you start to get into the emotional release. So the Tuesday is the emotional release, and then the Wednesday is your soda treatment, and on Thursday it's your another emotional release, evokes is what they call it. And over the weekend, I started to get these emotions of, I feel uncomfortable, possibly a bit of resentment, just a bit of angst inside of me about, things aren't working out and what's going on. And then by the time the Tuesday comes around and you sit there in the evox session and you go through the methodology they have, I've been uncovering my role in my life, which we can easily respond to the external environment in terms of what it gives us to respond to. So so when we respond to the external environment, if we're just focused out there, we're not actually aware of what's going on inside of us and why we're responding in that certain way. So as I go through my family tree, I see how I interact with those people, because it's all visualization and imagery and thought. As I see my interactions with those people, I pick up key lessons from those people. My grandmother, for one, she just showed me unconditional love, and she had a very tough life. I think all my grandparents had tough lives, and that's not to separate myself out from anybody else, because from where I've been in my own life, a lot of people have got a lot of family history that's difficult, and is passed down through our family tree. But my grandmother had a real tough life. She was beaten and emotionally abused for a long time. She just showed me it's all unconditional love. How you choose to respond to the situation is your power. So it doesn't matter what your external environment is like and your evidence around you, it's how you choose to focus in your own life that's the power. So somebody can beat you and abuse you for your entire life, but you can still love them. And that's a philosophical debate a lot of people could have, but inside of myself, I acknowledge that I can't hate people around me. Things have happened in my own life that I'm not pleased with. Things have happened with people around me that I look at that and go, I can judge that as being bad. But I don't hate those people, because what they actually in reality were doing, I just couldn't see it, was showing the limitations that I put on myself. The limitations around how I perceive the world, and also the limitations around how I can respond to the world. If you're reacting to the world around you, there's no way forward, because you're at the mercy of what comes at you. But if somebody comes at you and abuses you, and you choose to go off in a direction of finding happiness, then that abuse doesn't mean as much as it used to, so it doesn't have to affect you. So the emotional response over the 5, 6 weeks that I've been here, the 5 weeks, and doing the evokes training, has just helped me to see how I've lived in my life. I've been through a whole list of people in my life and some situations, especially around the head injuries that I've had. The situation in Canada when I had to leave Canada after my sister died, because emotionally it was too strong to stay in Canada. The pull to be back in New Zealand was huge. To work around the emotional issues there, but they all came back to, how did I choose to respond in that situation? Did I give my power away? And what I mean by, and to bring that back to this real situation about what I'm doing with the cancer treatment that I've been told that I have, the cancer, I could have chosen to be at the mercy of all of the discussions and the diagnoses that the medical system gave to me and said, this is where you're at. But I chose not to. Why do I think it's important? Because I've had my moments where life's been tough, especially after a diagnosis or a visit with a medical doctor. But I've spent most of my time in happiness and joy. I'm living. Doesn't matter what my external situations is, I'm making the most of the day by living. I'm seeing the joy, I'm having experiences with people. It's my life. It's my life, live it. If I'd have stayed in that emotional state of, I'm going to die, I don't know what the world's got for me, and this is a painful journey, it's going to hurt, and it's going to take a lot of effort, that's what you're going to get. And I have had a realization that I choose what I want. I want happiness, I want joy, I want connection with people, I want unconditional love. Those are the places I focus my mind on. The more I focus on that, the more it turns up in my life. And I've had some really cool examples of people, well, it's been cool examples the whole way through this journey, but really cool examples specifically in the last week that show that people are good people and people want to help people in difficult situations. And it encourages me no end that there's such a willingness of this world to be happy and healthy. So, yeah.
This the evokes. What does that stand for?
I don't know.
I'm curious in the sense that it certainly piques my interest, and in my own experience with Jungian psychology, I'm certainly familiar with the idea of reviewing your timeline and going back and getting information. I think there's a lot of different kind of modalities that deal with that, and I'm curious, like if for people that are listening to this and maybe you're blowing their mind with this information because they've never thought of it before. I mean, are there resources that you could point out to people with regards to this kind of evokes scenario where you're visiting your timeline and exploring your family tree?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I just pulled up my folder with what the definition of evokes is,
Yeah.
and it just says it's an experience to open you to new ways of seeing things. It's called perception reframing, and that's old perceptions that may be stuck and damaging are released, and you become free to choose better ways. And though my long-winded way of explaining that is what is there. The evokes, the thing that I like about it, and I think we mentioned this last time, was that in the emotional release or perception reframing world, there's a million different ways you can go and sort this out or work through it in a way that works for you. You can go and talk to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. You could go and talk to a best friend and have a cup of coffee and say, this is what I'm seeing. And your friend might just turn around and say, well, actually, you could reframe it this way. And that might initiate a response change in you. The evokes, what I like about it is it's around visualization and meditation. It's got sound therapy in there as well, because you're listening to, you've got headphones on like this, and it plays through your mind as you just allow thoughts to come to you about a certain situation. And what I like about it, which is cool, you don't really need it. Well, I shouldn't say that. What I like about it is cool is that it gives a physiological response. So you have your hand on a Zyto machine, which is just a biometric measure machine. And as you sit there and go through the movements or the reflections of the past, it brings up an immeasurable response in your body that is then shown on a graph on the computer.
Wow.
And so as you go through that, and they also use voice as well to measure your inflections and tone when you're talking about an issue. As you go through that, you work through a whole lot of situations. For me, it's all learnings. Well, what did that situation give to me? Well, it gave to me the ability to see how somebody who's wounded can influence somebody else who's wounded. And then it says, well, what was my role in that situation? What do I do in that? And so you look at how you responded to that situation. But you're never quite sure what it is that's the releasing statement, which is when you show that your tension around that is reframed or changed. Often it's this thought that's already been inside you. You just knew it. You're just too scared to voice it. One of the things they do ask you is when you have this minute and a half, 2-minute sound session where you visualize and think about these different situations, they ask you to speak about it because then they measure the frequencies of your voice. You can try and get the answer and you won't get it. You won't get the change of your physiology. But then when you speak honestly and truthfully from what's inside of you, it reframes it and it comes out the way it means to. and needs to. And often what I've noticed about it is it's all my perception about how I saw these things. It was nothing to do with the reality of what I was believing I was perceiving or experiencing. It's how did I respond to that? Now, those things all happened in my life, and those things have all shaped me to be who I am and helped me to get to where I am. So I can't be angry at any of that stuff because I had a role to play in it. I just wasn't consciously aware of the role that I was playing. But the constant message that keeps coming through from this is I get to choose. I get to choose how I move forward in my life. When a situation arises, it might be difficult, it might be confronting, but what do I want to focus on? And if we use that in environment now, this COVID-19 issue around the world is huge. And there's a lot of stress out there about it. And I've been through my stages of stress with it as well. But how you choose to be in that in the moment, do you want to be stressed out or do you want to have a smile on your face? Which one do you like the most? And feed that one. And this is what's interesting, and it's what I love about this technology, is it gives you easy access to figure this stuff out and the body will physiologically respond to it. But this is nothing new. You go and see memes on Facebook or the internet search where it will show you North American sayings around the two wolves, the black wolf and the white wolf. One's good, one's evil. Which one do you want to feed? You choose which one you feed. That's how much power we have in our lives to influence where our existence is.
You know, as you were talking about uh, the way that technology assists in this evokes process, it reminded me of actually reminded me of a lot of it reminded me of Tantra, in the sense that Tantra at its essence is about observation, is about observing the way that the body changes in reaction or response to different stimulus, whether it's a memory or whether it's I'm drinking water versus Mountain Dew, whatever. It's what you're doing is observing how the physical biological body is responding uh, to stimulus. So in a sense, it's achieving maybe the same end. And I would be curious to know if when you're not there any longer at the clinic, do you feel that there are things from the evokes treatment that you will be able to continue to utilize moving forward, things that you've learned that maybe you'll have to develop the skill sets for recognizing within your body if you've eaten something that isn't healthy or whatever, but do you feel that you'll sort of build on the training that you've received?
Definitely. I just wanted to go back to one point that you raised,
Yeah.
Tantra, the word Tantra. And I wanted to raise that because it's a specific example how in the past, my mindset, because Tantra is often, when people hear that word, it's all about sex.
Yeah.
Because that's the public perception of what it is.
Yeah.
But from my experience, because I had to go through a phase of understanding what that meant to me in terms of Tantra, because it came at me from a number of different directions, I realized it's an energy system. It's an energy system of the body. And it's so my perception of what Tantra means, well, it doesn't mean just sex. Now what it means is there's an expression of a human being in a way that's natural and flowing for them to bring them the greatest joy. And that's simplistically speaking. How that person gets there and how they experience that and what they do to get that point, that's up to them. It doesn't have to be what works for them, doesn't have to work for me. So anyway, part of why I raised that is the evokes, the process I went through was that helps me to reframe my understanding of that. And half of the reframing of that is just letting go of my perceptions that have come at me from societal pressure and societal influences that say this is bad and that's good. When in reality, now that I have done a bit of research around that Tantra, I understand that as something that I can be comfortable with. It doesn't have to be this big scary thing that you've got to go and all of a sudden it's just mass orgies. It's nothing like that. It depends who you are and what you want to do, but it doesn't have to be that for me. The perception reframing. So in terms of going forward, in terms of how do I implement it in my life, it's a new methodology that I hadn't experienced before. It's cool in that I like it because it gives somebody who isn't so, maybe wants more scientific evidence behind something around your emotional state. It gives you something to show that you've made a physiological change. The key thing that I've found is that as I started to eat better, started to become aware of my perceptions, I'm more aware of what's going on inside my body. So as I go through the evokes, I'll go through, because you have a minute and a half of these sessions playing with music and visions and imagery and stuff. You can feel your physiology change as you go through that. And when you get to the release statement, it just sort of lifts and goes light and you go, oh, that feels nice. I wasn't aware of that in terms of my body's energy feelings until I cleaned my body up. And the first place I started to clean my body up was the nutrition, in terms of eating better, more live food, less processed food, less grains, less artificial additives and stuff. My body I could start to feel and hear my body. I couldn't before then because it was so full of junk, I couldn't hear it. So that awareness was cool in terms of allowing me to understand what's going on in my body because I can hear it. In terms of going forward, Dr. Joe Dispenza's work is exactly the same thing. It's just wrapped up in a scientific way that gets you through a meditation without having to have the biomechanical feedback machine. And so these machines are $11,000 US from my initial research. So that's out of reach for a lot of people, but you can still get these effects through other channels. Abraham Hicks on YouTube, and he's quite a controversial subject for a lot of people and a bit confronting for a start, possibly because it's not what we're told reality is. And so you've got to let go of some disbelief and listen to the message rather than the vehicle that it's coming through. And they, once again, say it's all about how you focus on a situation and how you frame it. So the practice there is, if something happens, and I think we talked about this, it might have been about this picture in a previous video. If something blows up over here, so I don't know, something blows up, there's an explosion over there, and it's miles away, but there's an explosion, and the media reports it. Well, then you can go and get yourself fully energetically involved in the explosion and feel all the emotions of the people involved and the dire consequences that are in that situation. Or you can choose to say, that's an experience that's happened. I choose to focus on the things that are good in my life. You know that's happened. You're not ignoring it, but you're choosing the energy, that makes you feel the best. And that is, if you're a grandparent, I've got lovely grandkids running around me. If you're in the garden, you've got these beautiful flowers just blooming. Now, in this world, both are existences, but it's the interpretation we put on it that's what making us healthy or not. So what do you want to focus on? Things that make you feel real bad or not? And so when an explosion happens, we can get stuck in the trauma of that, or we can go, an explosion happens. I wish the best for the people involved in that. I can't change or influence that. I'm going to focus on my roses. And that simple statement there causes a lot of judgment from people as well. Well, you're irresponsible. You're not sympathetic to those people. But I am. I'm sympathetic to those people because I can't help anybody else unless I'm the healthiest that I can be.
Yeah.
So lots of methodologies. It's not difficult for me to keep that therapy up without the biometric machines, because you can feel it in your body. You know the signals when you've let go of something.
Yeah. I think to your point, anybody who is maybe listening to you and saying, oh, but that's not practical and that's just living in denial and et cetera, et cetera. I would really encourage those people to read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who in the midst of the Holocaust was imprisoned at a concentration camp, and he wrote this book about his experiences, and came out of that experience saying, they can take anything from you except for your attitude. That is something that you give away. And so that would be my answer to anybody who is maybe skeptical or even ridiculing what you've just said, because you know, this is somebody who was in a concentration camp and who was experiencing these horrific things on a daily basis, yet who still maintained through that the people that were able to um, survive those kind of conditions and come out of it were people who had the ability to direct their attention and to reframe the situation that they were in from a situation of self-loathing and fear into one of compassion and dare I say even love. Um, so I would really encourage people to seek that book out, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
That's a good book. I haven't read it, but I've heard a lot about it, and I like what you just shared there. The discussion, I like the way you framed it there, that if people find what I just said controversial, it could be controversial. But what I found is that it's an interpretation of a situation, and it's only a confrontation when it doesn't jive or gel with something we already believe. The reason why I take this and I run with this methodology is that before I even got diagnosed, I bought the Hay House Healing Cancer World Summit. I bought it on a USB stick and watched that. And they talked about your perception a lot, which is funny because you'd all think that to get out of cancer, it's all about medical treatments and nutrition. But they talked about more than that. It's the emotional battle that goes on, because when you're confronted with a doctor telling you this is the way the situation is, and I've experienced this, you go deep. It hurts. It hurts to go, oh my goodness, my life could be over because of this situation. And then it doesn't matter how positive you are, you go to the doctor and get checked up again, and they'll say, well, it's stage 4. And you go, oh, geez, I know what stage 4 means. But it's just their definition. And it's that ability to go, it's not going to get me. I'm going to find something purposeful in this. The book that I read as a result of that Hay House World Healing Cancer Summit was a book called Radical Remissions, and I think I've mentioned this before in the videos. And 9 key factors to getting healthy. Of those 9 key factors, only 2 were physical. 1 was nutrition, 1 was herbs and supplements. These radical remissions is a case study. I think it's about 1,800 cancer survivors that were terminal diagnosis last days. And they turn their lives around, and radical remission means you've had 5 years at least of being clear of cancer. It's their emotional state that is a huge role that is so often ignored in our society. And there's a lot of pressures in our world at the moment around your emotional state. A lot of people, a lot of organizations trying to get your attention to tell you what's the right way forward. But one of the other key factors from those 9 key factors, apart from your emotional health, is your belief in knowing what's right for you. And I would put it out there that a lot of us don't know what's right for us. I spent 44 years of my life not knowing what was right for me. I only started to find that out when I started to take control of my life in terms of making decisions to get healthy, eat better, don't watch TV. And that's not been ignorant, it's been smart. Don't get involved in things that are detrimental to my body. Drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. If that's what floats your boat and makes you happy, go for it. But it doesn't work for me. So when I started to take responsibility for that, I started to show health improvements. So that's why I've had to have a change of my emotional perspective. And this is nothing new. I'm sitting here talking to you, Mark, and you already know this stuff. And I've got a lot of friends that do. And I've got a lot of friends as well through this journey who've been through cancer, told they're going to die, have to do chemo and all that sort of stuff. And they're still living without doing those things. because they chose to put themselves first in what they know. Now, that doesn't mean that you just let go of the whole medical system at all. So I just want to put a proviso in there that sometimes chemo and surgery and radiation is the option that you have to take. And you'll know when it's not, because everything in your body's telling you, I can't do this. But there are times when that's needed. So you've got to find your own journey with this stuff. That's why you've got to have a perspective around your emotional state. What is it that's important to me and what is right for me? I couldn't make that decision before this journey. I couldn't make the decision of what was right for me. I allowed the world around me to dictate what was right for me. And the world around me is your family. Now, I'm not knocking anybody. My parents tried to do the best they could with what they had to look after me. But they had views on the world based on their childhoods and their life experiences. When you go to school, the school's set up to focus on people that get academic achievements are the ones that get the top jobs outside of it. That's not the way a human works. A human works around, some people learn through textbooks, some people learn through doing, some people learn through listening, singing. There's different ways of learning, but our system, when I went through and before that, is definitely set up to provide one type of outcome. So when I started to embrace what's unique about me and how I learn and how I need to live my life, I started to get healthy. That's why the emotional aspect is so important.
Mm. Earlier this week, I watched a documentary, and I don't remember exactly what it was called, but it dealt with what you were referencing, what you were talking about with regards to, we think we are making a choice independently, but yet we've kind of been conditioned to make certain choices through our exposure to uh, really all aspects of society. Society has kind of conditioned us to make certain choices, and we assume that we're making choices uh, uh, from our own free will, without realizing that we've been manipulated into making certain choices. And because we think we made them of our own free will, we attach our identity to these choices that become our beliefs. Um, but yet the whole time it's just been this very orchestrated um, system uh, that produces specific results to line the pockets of wealthy people, pretty much. um, and as I share this, I think of another documentary that I watched years ago. It's a BBC documentary that is widely available on YouTube called The Century of Self. And it really talks about how in the early 1900s, Freud's nephew was hired by some U.S. corporations to sort of hack into the the mindset of consumers, and from that point on, everything that we know about society changed, and what we are living in right now is a result of those initial efforts that were made by the wealthy to control the behavior of consumers. Yeah, that's a fascinating one. The Century of Self. I would absolutely recommend that.
We'll bring that back to a real world situation for me. So I was looking through some of my reports this morning, just trying to figure out where has the stuff come into my life. And I'm looking at the heavy metal toxins, and I'm looking at the the heavy metal toxins primarily, and then just some of the parasites and things that are in your body. And I was just looking at how these things can come into my body, because they're in my body. Toxic metals are in my body. So the key ones at the moment are lead, mercury, aluminium, and tin. and a couple of others. Barium. What I identified was that a lot of those toxins actually come in through the medical procedures. Now, the barium I knew about. With my head injury, I had a lot of imaging done, MRIs and CT scans, and I also, obviously, with a cancer diagnosis, you get these compounds put into your body to help the imaging and the X-rays and the scans. When I was going through the cancer diagnosis and getting this stuff done, I didn't really research. I'm going through the emotional stuff of what's actually going on in my life. What does this mean? Oh my goodness, how can I get to this point? All that sort of stuff. So you don't really know what's going on. So one of the forms I had to sign was to say that I'm going to get a additive put into my body so they can help with a CT scan. Okay, so I'd mistakenly ticked the wrong box. But when I went into there, the attending nurse that was getting me prepped for the scan said to me, so you don't want to have this enhancer? And I went, oh, what did I take? And he says, no. And I said, well, I don't know, what's necessary? And he says, well, you're not going to get the scan if you don't get it done. So he just scratched out my tick in the wrong box and put a tick in there, and he said, sign it. Okay, all good. I knew that I was going to have to get something in my body to understand the imaging. So I kind of took that. That's not enough decision or information to be able to make a valid conclusion in terms of what is going into your body. When you read the pamphlets, and this is me probably being a bit political on this, when you read the brochures and the pamphlets come out to you from the institutions, it says it's all good, it's accepted practices, there may be some side effects, but nothing major. Okay, sure. That's not informed consent, in my view. I signed the piece of paper, so I take full responsibility for putting it into my body. I didn't know it at the time, but I do. I wasn't informed. What are the side impacts? How is this barium collected? What does it do to the human body? There's nothing like that because you don't have time. You're part of a system to get you through because there's so many people dealing with cancers these days and needing imaging machines. So I found that a bit frustrating, to be honest. And then I looked at where else can this stuff come into my body? And I keep coming back to vaccinations. I've had a lot of vaccinations in my time. When I wanted to travel overseas, when I was in my early 20s, to go and live overseas and travel through the, like Turkey and Britain and stuff, there was vaccinations you had to have to go to these places. So I'm thinking, well, I want to go traveling, so I'm going to have these vaccinations. I'm a guy in my 20s. I'm not going to research, and I wasn't even aware I needed to research what was getting put into a vaccination to get put into my body. Vaccines are safe, aren't they? And so all of a sudden I'm getting all these injections. Where's all this stuff coming from? So the more injections I'm getting, I'm loading my body up with these toxins. Now, there are other places these toxins can come from. But if you go onto the CDC website in the US, it says it generally comes from your food, your environment, or something else. There's only a certain number of places this can come into our body. So why do I share that? I'm not aware of what's going inside of my body. I lived a lifetime of that. I used to eat heavily processed meats. I used to eat pizzas, drink Coca-Cola, not a lot of Coca-Cola, but I love pizzas. And I ate a lot of food that I thought was food because it's food. It's advertised on TV. You go to the supermarket, it's in a packet. That's nice and easy. I wasn't aware of what's going into that food and how it's impacting my body. So now I've got toxic overload in terms of the metals that are in my body. So how do I get rid of that? First, identify where it comes from, and then two, find a way to get it out. So I didn't know where they came from, but I knew intuitively I had to come to see Dr. Batar and the Centers for Advanced Medicine to get this chelation, to get these heavy metals out of your body. It's not it is a revolutionary practice, and it's quite controversial in some minds, but it's worldwide. People are doing chelation. Even in New Zealand, I can get chelation to get these heavy metals out of my body. So by being here, I'm getting these metals out of my body. But the next step, which is important, is what am I going to do with my body going forward? What gets to go into my body? Now, I know I'm feeling better now than I have done for a long period of time. I'm tired from the treatment, but my body feels good and is getting better. The markers and the blood results are showing my body's getting better. Do I go and put more stuff into my body in the future? That's a big decision. I'm not comfortable with that. I need to have a lot more information in front of me about what this means.
Yeah.
Informed consent, and this is a political point. Informed consent means having a full picture, not a partial picture.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely, I agree. It leads me to an uncomfortable um, statement, though, because it is so obvious in our society how we have waived even the expectation of informed consent. Um, when it comes to, for instance, how many people do you know that actually read the terms and conditions when they're installing apps on their phone? Uh, you know, I would challenge you. You know, I mean, do you even know 3 people that do that, that read that? Um, you know, and this is in spite of you know, Cambridge Analytica and the whole Facebook Inquisition trial that was surrounded by that, where it pretty much came into full disclosure that our online presence is not private.
Not at all.
If you're participating on any kind of platform, any kind of social media platform, that is simply data points that are being sold. And the fact that we completely overlook that for the sake of convenience certainly suggests to me that that we have willingly waived our right to disclosure, in the sense that we haven't even taken advantage of the opportunity that we have to, you know, whether it's hitting the terms and conditions on an app on our phone, or even just the blatant disregard of reading the ingredients before we buy a product to see what's in it. It's kind of like you said, if it's being sold at the grocery store and it's in a package and I can cook and consume this within half an hour, okay, I'm in. And without thinking about, well, if your bananas in America have been shipped to you from Chile and they're still green, don't you think that maybe there's an issue with that? Why is it still ripe if it has traveled internationally like that? Well, obviously because it's been sprayed by something, but we completely overlook like the most basic information out of convenience. Um,
I,
wow.
it's a huge topic, and I guess it's interesting that I'm experiencing this awareness, or a rising awareness, in a time where my health is paramount to me. What is going on? What takes me away from being healthy? And it's not about, it could be lack of knowledge, but it's just not even an awareness of a boundary. When something crosses into my body, then that's a boundary being crossed. What only, and my intent now is only stuff that's of my highest health goes into my body. So you then got to be aware of what's going into your body. So you start to investigate, well, what are production procedures that are used? What are transportation procedures that are used? What happens when something crosses a border? What happens when you're putting all these additives into your body? Now, the FDA and the CDC will claim that, or the FDA more likely, that there's tolerable levels that can go in your body. And I was looking at the New Zealand government's website around immunisation this morning about acceptable levels of things. And there's nothing conclusive. There's no data there. It's just words. There's no data to show these number of people. And that's okay. Maybe I just need to make an information request to get more information. So that's something that I'm learning, is that I can be proactive in seeking out more information. But if I was to turn around and tell you, or anybody, you're going to inject mercury and aluminium into your body, people would go, why? That's silly. Well, anyway, I'm going to leave that there, Mark, because this could get
Yeah.
very controversial, and it's not what I'm
Sure.
here about.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope, well, and so we all have our own thoughts in the background, but what I am finding is the more that I explore my health, the more I realize the choices I was making based on the environment around me rather than what was best for me.
Mm-hmm.
Self-responsibility is the key I've had to learn. When a doctor's telling you you've got 12 months, maybe a couple of years to live if we can get some treatment through you and it's going to work, it's your choice how you respond to that. In
Yeah.
my situation, I made a very conscious decision that I was going to explore other avenues. Now, to me, this whole journey is the first time I've put myself first in my life. What was interesting was when I signed up for the development program I did last year with around Landmark, they asked you what your intent was. My intent was, how come I can't put myself first in my life? Well, that was a pretty big wish, really, because I certainly had to make a decision pretty quickly. But what I learned was it's my own perception of myself prevented me from putting myself first. But when I sit in front of doctors and I'm saying I'm going to choose a different path than what you're recommending, I am taking responsibility for myself and anything that comes from that.
Mm.
In that state, I'm sitting there going, if this doesn't work, I'm dead. That's the mindset, because you don't know any different. But I was willing to take responsibility for myself, because I knew I wasn't going to spend my life not being responsible. With what life I've got left, I'm going to live it the best way I can. So that was a huge awakening for me. Difficult time to make it. Just to express to people, you can make that decision before you even get to this point. But it will take a conscious awareness of what is good for you and what's not.
Yeah. So to that point, let's get back to your treatment and what do you anticipate to happen over the next week?
So over the next week, it's my final week of treatment. So it's the same process. I'll take some more bloods to measure me in the middle of the week to see where I'm at. Some more emotional release, evokes training, another soda treatment with a higher dose. So that will be and at the end of the week, we'll sit down and have a conversation about what the next steps are, because that's the completion of my final round of the first round. And then I have to do some more tests. I'm not quite sure exactly the test, but they have to get sent away. So it's going to take a week to get those results back, which then decide what the next step is.
Okay.
What it's kind of looking like at the moment, because a number of different factors at the moment in terms of where I'm at physically and financially. There's limitations. So what is the next step? So at the moment, it's looking like, well, I'm going to figure out what is the best course of treatment I need going forward, and then trying to find out ways I can get that delivered in New Zealand until I need to do something more over here, or come back over and get a challenge, because
Okay.
they do ask that you do more tests in the future to monitor your situation and tailor the situation you're in. I will be carrying a whole lot of supplements home with me that are around mineral revitalization, around parasitic removal, digestive. The key thing that's come up this week in terms of supplementation was that I need more support for my prebiotics, probiotics, and the digestive process when it's down in my stomach and colon. So that was a good awareness, but that's the change. So I think I've mentioned before, but I got 30 supplements I have to take every day. So that's a pretty full-on regimen. So I'll be bringing those home to keep those up as well.
So is there, I mean, potentially then, does that mean that you could be going back to New Zealand in May, in the latter half of May?
More likely the first week, yeah, latter half of May, June, possibly the first week of June. We're looking at flights at the moment, nothing confirmed, because I still have to wait for the end of treatment discussions, but possibly the first week of June. It's just flights are disappearing very quickly. Yeah, they're getting booked up very fast. Limited number of flights now, and the seats are getting taken very quickly. So it's finding a day that I can get home.
Hmm. Do you have any idea what being back in New Zealand would look like for you at this point? I mean, are you physically capable of going to work? Would you want to do that? What is the possible situation look like for you back in New Zealand?
Sure. A short to that answer is I don't know. So if we're looking at the first week of June to head home, that's another month away. And then I understand, but this may not be the case, I understand at the moment when you return to New Zealand from overseas, you're in a 14-day quarantine with some restrictions around your movements there. So that would be something to work through. After that, I don't really have an idea at the moment. Probably just go home to my family and figure out, I feel like I want to work because I don't want to be sitting around doing nothing. Obviously, that's going to be dependent on what my body's feeling like when I get home. But even if it's just a job to be out delivering groceries, finding some area where there's a shortage and to help the community, because from my layperson perspective, this global crisis is going to have a huge impact financially. Economically, there's going to be significant changes, and so it's about how are we going to work together as a collective, as people, as a planet, as a country, to make sure everybody's looked after. So maybe just some part-time work to help pay some bills and put some food on the table. But yeah, that's no real aspirations other than, well, no, I'll put it this way. That's kind of the outline that's forming in my head. What I am learning is that it's an allowance. I'll figure that out when I get there, because that's when the possibilities and the opportunities arise to make a decision that's relevant. I'm not going to plan too far out, because
Sure, yeah.
with the world the way it is, who knows? Who knows?
So by the time that we talk to you next week, you will have had the conversation at the clinic, and we'll have taken some tests that are going to be sent away.
Yep.
So potentially when we chat next week, obviously you won't have those results back, but you will have had a bit of a conversation about moving forward.
Yeah, there'll be some more clarity there about next steps. Yes,
Okay.
definitely. Yep.
Awesome. Okay, well, with that being said, do you have any sort of final thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to try not to cry this time. The thing that's been coming up for me this whole week is around choosing the life that you want. And that sounds quite vague, I guess, to some people. But if we choose a world that we want, which is full of happiness, compassion, joy, what you want to experience, and we work towards that, that's what we're going to get. If we keep choosing a world where there's conflict, frustration with other people, non-acceptance, then we're going to end up with that. The self-responsibility is about taking power over your own life. How you want to live it, and even how you want to die, is a very powerful thing to do. Believing in your right to have a happy existence, choosing what's right for you, and not judging other people if they choose a different path, is something I've found to be very useful. I've had to get a new appreciation for different types of people in this world, and I see the beauty in their journey, if you want to call it that, or their life, because they're just doing the best they can to get through the situation. Nobody's got this all figured out. They're just doing people are trying to do the best they can with what they've got. But when we become aware of what we're bringing into our life and take responsibility for that, and it's not a blame culture, it's all my fault, I'm such a bad person. It's not that. I'm responsible for what comes into my life and how I respond to that. When we do that, we can make anything possible. We can make that world we want. Peace, happiness, joy. I just want to encourage people to be aware of what they do in their own lives, because it's all us. It's all ourselves that's driving our lives and how it pans out.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Durrick, and it's been great to catch up with you again. And I look forward to talking with you next week and hearing what that conversation was like and how you're feeling.
Cool. Thank you, Mark. Much appreciated.
All right. Take care.
See you next week. Bye-bye.